Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And on the program, we return to our All Things Africa edition, our journey across the continent and looking at the history and current affairs of each nation. We're still in West Africa, and we now explore the West African country of Gambia. And who better to teach us about this country or any African country than our returning champion, very good friend to the show, the brilliant historian and journalist and anti-imperialist activist Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire, and also a frequent contributor to Black Agenda Report, amongst other publications, who will be our guide on this trip to Gambia's history and current affairs. So Abayomi, first off, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Always, yes. Always an honor and real privilege to have you as our history teacher, Abayomi. So, all my thanks and appreciation for the time you give us. And as always, folks, please help One Plus One by sharing widely our content. The last couple of weeks have actually been pretty good, but you never know when Facebook is going to do their bizarre censorship again. So, as always, I encourage everybody to please share, post episodes of One Plus One, and yeah, and again, please share widely One Plus One across your social medias and email it to your friends and comrades, people in the education world, and so forth. And as always, folks, please donate generously to Pan African Newswire and Black Agenda Report themselves, and please donate generously if you can to One Plus One. Share all of One Plus One's content, past and present, help us overcome the far-right algorithms and help us overcome the monopoly Western corporate media and Western state media has in the social media world by, again, sharing widely all of One Plus One's content and, again, donating to us. And so now on to the topic at hand. So, Abayomi, as always, tell us, what was Gambia like before British colonization? How did it become a British colony, and what were the conditions of the people like when under British colonialism?
The history of the Gambia, as it became known, is very much integral to the overall regional history in West Africa. They were a part of the ancient kingdoms of Ghana and Mali, which were prominent during the period, the so-called Middle Ages in Europe, but also in Africa as well. And there was also connections with the Takurur, one of the major ethnic groups in the region, whose human settlements and civilization can be traced back at least to the first century of the Christian era. There was also the multilingual and multi-ethnic mix in Gambia between the Soninke, the Takurur, also the intervention of Berbers and Arabs in later years. But we have to understand that Gambia is a very, very small strip of territory that's completely surrounded by the country of Senegal. The only opening they have is to the Atlantic Ocean in Banjul, the capital of the country. The population still remains relatively small. When it gained independence, it was less than 1 million, perhaps 500,000 people were part of the whole independence process. So there was, of course, resistance to the intervention of European colonial powers. The Portuguese, it's noted, came first, and eventually they ceded or sold, as they say, the Gambia, surrounding the Gambia River, to the British as early as the period during the 1500s, 1588, when the first deals began to take place between the British and the French surrounding the Gambia. So yes, it is part and parcel of the broader cultures and civilizations throughout West Africa. And of course, with the intervention of the Portuguese and then later, of course, the French and the British, things changed radically. They became part and parcel of the Atlantic slave trade. The Atlantic slave trade decimated areas in West Africa, but Gambia and Senegal were major territories that were utilized for the capture and export of Africans for the purpose of chattel slavery. And this began during the 15th century and continued all the way to the 19th century. So we're talking about 4 centuries of consistent underdevelopment, exploitation, and national oppression throughout West Africa.
Uh, Before we talk about how it became an independent country and the early years of its independence, talk to us just a bit more about what were the conditions like when the British colonized Gambia.
There was the continuation of the Atlantic slave trade. There was forced labor. There was the theft of the national resources of the country, meaning its waterways, and also the imposition of a cash crop economy, mainly groundnuts that were produced there. This was largely after the British took over control of the area. So it was a harsh political, economic, and security system that was imposed by the British during their period of domination, which extended from the 16th century all the way up until the 1960s.
Wow. And how did Gambia become independent from Britain, England? Was it one of violent struggle or non-violence and a peaceful transfer of power? Actually, you know what? Answer that briefly before I ask my question about the early years of independence.
Yes, well, there was resistance that took place all during the period of French, Portuguese, as well as British intervention in the area. Even as late as the latter years of the 19th century and early 20th century, there were rebellions, there was conflict when they tried to impose their colonial system on the indigenous people. They attempted to divide the various ethnic groups and kingdoms against each other in order to promote the prosperity and domination of the British and the French. So yes, there was resistance to the imposition of slavery as well as colonialism. And that is how the situation developed. During World War II, there were some people from the Gambia who served in the British military during this time period. Also, after the war, there was, well, actually during World War II, there was an airstrip that was developed which facilitated the transport of U.S. Army troops during World War II. And we know that in North Africa, some of the most fiercest fighting took place during World War II between the Italians and the British, and then later the Germans and the British. And then there was the intervention of the United States in North Africa as well after 1942. So there was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of jockeying going on. But during the 1950s, we had the rise of the independence parties, the pro-independence parties. There was the United Party. There was later the People's Progressive Party. So these were the two main parties during the period leading up to independence in Gambia.
Fascinating. And so Gambia becomes an independent country, sort of. But people can look into. Well, yes, Gambia sort of becomes an independent country. The Queen was the head of states for the early years. That's why I say kind of independence. But from there, talk to us about the government and the legacy of Gambia's first president, Sir. And apologies if I'm butchering the name, but Abayomi is always going to correct me when I do when I get the names wrong. So talk to us about the legacy of Gambia's first president, Sir Dawa Jawara of the PPP, and the PPP, his party is the People's Progressive Party. And he ruled or was elected or was in office from April 24th, 1970, until he was ousted in the military coup July 22nd, 1994. So, Abayomi, do tell us, what's your assessment of President Jarwa and his political party, the PPP? Is it one leftists should celebrate and a legacy? And is it a legacy where a leftist tried to do much, but external factors kept sabotaging good efforts? Or is his legacy of Gambia's socioeconomics one largely of reactionary right-wing policies and being a puppet for Western imperialism, neocolonialism? And just before Abayomi answers that, just an aside note, On the PPP's own website, they describe themselves as a social democratic party committed to advancing the interests and the welfare of the Gambia and its people. Its base of support has largely been rural areas, as Abayomi mentioned, which is why Wikipedia attributes agrarianism to their political ideology. But reading on Wikipedia, it also says that at some point the party embraced, oh God, the ghastly third way political philosophy of Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, and others. Geez, I don't even call them social democrats, but other social democrats, which in a nutshell was pivoting to the right, pivoting to the economic hard right, and even on social issues, moving to the moving to the right. Yeah, the far right. So I'm very curious. What's your assessment of his time in office, and any periods when he started well and then ended badly, or one of those left parties that governs like right wingers, despite whatever they claim on paper and in rhetoric? Oh, Abayomi. Oh, one moment. One moment. Hold on, folks. Hold on, folks. Uh-oh. Okay, Abayomi, can you hear me? Okay, wait, one moment, one moment. Abayomi, can you hear me? Ah,
Okay, you just
sorry
started back.
about that, folks. Sorry about that. Okay, okay, I might have to do a little bit of editing later. Okay,
Of course.
okay, so Abayomi, what did you hear from my question before the internet went down on me?
Well, I think you're trying to get at what was the political character of the post-independence government. There was a transitional process in 1961 and 1962, and there was a chief minister that was appointed by the name of Sar Njai, and he had a group called the United Party. Yet, when elections were held in 1962, it was Sir Dada Jawara who was elected as part of the PPP, which won the overwhelming majority of the electorate beginning in 1962. But this was just a transitional government. It was called self-rule. They didn't become officially independent until 1965. And it was also led by the Progressive People's Party, the PPP, under the leadership of Dada Jawara. And he led the country from 1965 up until there was a coup d'etat in 1994, although there was an attempted coup in 1981, a left-wing attempted coup, which proved to be a turning point in regard to the history of Gambia.
Then please do talk to us a bit more about that. So is his legacy one where, yeah, so is his legacy one that how should I say? So was his legacy the following? Was he one of those? Was he and his party one of those parties that starts off doing a lot of very good left wing policies, but then pivots to the right, or was he one of those? Or was he and his party one of those people that talks from the left but actually governs from the right? Given that when you read about the party, I mean, on paper they call themselves social democratic, but it's but when reading about the party, it also said that the party embraced a third way, which was when which is the political philosophy of the ghastly Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, Jean Chrétien of the Liberal Party of Canada, where basically all of these sort of center-left parties pivoted hard to the economic right. And is that his legacy in a nutshell, or how do you assess him as a as a leftist yourself?
Yes, I would think his position was more moderate, perhaps centrist in that regard. Um, he was not antagonistic, it appeared, initially towards the left, although things started to change during the early 1980s. But yes, he promoted African unity. The PPP was one of the co-founders of the Economic Community of West African States, which today has become an extremely right wing in regard to its political as well as economic orientation. Jawara was considered a stabilizing force in Gambia for many, many years, although the economy began to deteriorate, particularly after the mid 1970s, because there was a worldwide recession taking place during that particular time period. And the expansion of public service brought a lot of new people into the government service in Gambia. And that, of course, as well, created larger deficits, and an economic decline took place during the early 1980s, which actually created the conditions for the attempted coup in late July of 1981.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the major opposition parties to the ruling PPP was the National Convention Party, the
Yes.
NCP, who themselves were supposed to be center left. So that being said, how was his foreign policy? Was he largely in alliance with Western imperial states like Britain, the U.S., Canada, France, NATO, EU, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, or was he more aligned with the USSR, China, Eastern European communist states, Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, or was his foreign policy vaguely non-aligned and trying to be open and good to both sides during the Cold War?
Yeah, I think his position officially was more towards non-alignment, meaning that on the one hand, they maintain relationships with the socialist states and advocated support for the national liberation movements, but then on the other hand, was not hostile either towards Britain and the United States. Even after the country gained independence in 1965, Jawara was designated as prime minister. And it wasn't until after another election in 1970 that he was designated as president. But they still remained within the British Commonwealth system. After 1965, the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, was also considered the Queen of the Gambia as well.
Exactly.
So they maintain ties with the former British colonial rulers during this particular time period.
Yeah, in fact, I'm very glad you mentioned that because I think it's very important to emphasize this. I can't stand when people, including the best of the left, sometimes when they say to me that the British Empire, it ended after World War II, and England is just it's kind of a puppet of the United States, and I have to push back harsh against that because the British Commonwealth is basically the British Empire completely restructured and so forth. So when a country like Gambia or Nigeria or the Bahamas or Barbados or Jamaica even, when those countries have the UK monarch as the head of state with their governor general, that governor general answers to the Queen, now King of England. And
Yes.
anybody who thinks that anybody who thinks that the UK monarchs don't have any power or that Britain itself does not have any power over their supposedly ex-colonies when the king is still the head of state, well, folks, you might want to do some more research because as Australia proved, Gough Whitlam, who was one of Australia's most left-wing prime ministers, when he started to, buck against the U.S. over secret CIA spy bases and was interested in making Australia into, a republic and so forth like that, he was sacked by the governor general of by the governor general who answers to the Queen of England. That was, in fact, when Gough Whitlam was sacked, that was basically a UK U.S. backed coup and so forth like that, and then it's the same with Canada. The head of state is the UK monarch and so forth like that, and a lot of these uh, African countries that still have that still have the UK monarch as their head of state. It's just another way of British colonialism, but just completely restructured and so forth. So,
Yes.
yeah, actually, anything you want to say but before I ask my next question about that?
Yeah, just to say that the country being so small and having an economy that's totally dependent upon international finance capital made it very, very difficult for them to exert their independence as a state. And of course, this resulted in a decline in the economy, and the decline in the economy fostered unrest inside the country during the late 1970s and early 1980s. So it became a serious problem for the Gambia. Uh, it became the Republic of the Gambia, and in later years, the name was changed, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. But leading up to the situation that occurred, the crisis of 1981, uh, the Jamaharia government in Libya was accused of fomenting dissent inside of Gambia. This was during 1980.
Uh-huh.
And there was the formation of a political party called the Gambian Socialist Revolutionary Party, which was started during the late 1970s, early 1980s. And as a result, the party was banned and the Libyan embassy was shut down. This was in October of 1980. And diplomatic relations between the Gaddafi government and the Jawara government were severed. Now, this was in late 1980. And then as months went on, there was more unrest. Also during that time period, there was some dissent and even conflict inside the so-called field force, which is like a paramilitary police agency in Gambia that was composed of maybe a few hundred police officers and paramilitary forces inside the country. And the leaders, one of the leaders of the field force was assassinated by a lower ranking military figure. And as a result of that, there were shakeups inside of the field force. But this was also related to the fact that Libya had been charged with interference in the internal affairs of the Gambia. And of course, there was a severing of the diplomatic relations between the two countries. So this is what was going on during the late 1970s and early 1980s. And then, of course, the attempted coup, which took place on July 30th of 1981, was a very, very interesting phenomenon. President Jawara had left the country. He was attending the royal wedding of the then Prince Charles and Diana.
Okay.
During that time period, the Gambian Socialist Revolutionary Party, and they were assisted by elements within the field force, took over the government. This lasted for about 8 days. And during that time period, they were able to seize some of the paramilitary bases. And they also took over the Voice of Gambia radio station. And they announced that they were forming a revolutionary government in Gambia. But what happened was that President Jawara announced the same night that this coup took place that he had no fear that he would be returning to the Gambia to reassume his position as head of state, as the president of the country. So the Senegalese military, which they had formed a joint defense pact as early as 1965, intervened on behalf of the PPP government and actually crushed the coup. It took about 8 days. But during that period, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 people were killed in the subsequent fighting to reimpose President Jawara as a head of state in Gambia. So this is what happened. So it was a very traumatic period for the Gambia. And as a result of that, there was a whole restructuring of the government as well as the economy during the post-coup period of the early and mid 1980s.
Did he govern more to the right then at the start at the dawn of the 80s after he survived this coup then?
Yeah, I would say more to the right, because what happened was that because of the economic problems inside the country that led to unrest and dissent, even within the paramilitary forces and among the population, in the mid 1980s, they adopted what was known as the Economic Recovery Program, the ERP, which is quite similar to the structural adjustment programs that were prevalent across Africa during starting in the mid 1980s and extended all the way into the 1990s.
Well,
So as a
that's
result of that, they had to restructure the economy, and they, of course, created conditions for loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and other financial institutions. These loans went into Gambia in order to help stabilize the economy. But nonetheless, what eventually happened was that it fostered corruption inside of Gambia during the mid 1980s, all during the period of the 1980s and early 1990s. So there
wow.
was allegations of corruption. People were sacked from their positions for embezzlement and other financial crimes. So the economy was not doing well at all in terms of the early period of the 1990s. And there was another coup, this one which was successful by some junior paramilitary officers led by a man named Yahya Jammeh. This took place in 1994. But the
Actually, uh, perfect segue because that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. So you've already explained what led to the ouster of the PPP and Sir Dawa Jawara. So that's interesting. That although they weren't radically left, they did have left policies, but then pivoted sharp to the right and voodoo economics and the dawn of austerity of austerity politics. So that led to the ouster of the PPP. But that's interesting, and I'll explain why why that's interesting. I cannot wait to get your response on this. Is how do you assess his successor, a military government led by Colonel Yawa Jame, who first ruled under military rule from July 22nd, 1994 to November 6th, 1996. And again, supposedly under civilian rule and democracy, he rules from November 6th, 1996 to January 21st, 2017. How do you assess his first years under the Armed Forces Provincial Ruling Council, and then as a member of the Alliance for Patriotic Reorientation and Construction, the APRC? And from what I read about them on Wikipedia, looks very much far right ideology, and far right with then radical reactionary Islam as part of the ideology. So the worst of both worlds when it comes to fiscal conservatism and socially regressive, socially conservative politics. When he got into power, Jammeh advocated for a liberal market economy. And we all know, or all of us who are radical leftists and critical leftists should know exactly what coded soft language like that means. Unrestrained, laissez-faire free markets, black capitalism, African capitalism, not good for a people who's faced centuries and decades of the slave trade and colonialism, which is a form of capitalism imperialism. Anywho, sadly, they had super majorities throughout much of their time in office. So, Abayomi, how do you assess how do you assess their legacy when talking about Gambia's socioeconomics domestically? And was he still maintaining close alliances with Western imperial powers like Britain, the US, France, and their allies, or BRICS are allowed to have good relations with everyone? Very curious response.
Yes, so first of all, I think it's important that to recognize that the economy was in a free fall during the early 1990s in the Gambia. And the reason why the 1981 coup perhaps did not succeed, it was not able to consolidate, was that there were divisions within the security forces and within the government over how to proceed after the Gambian Socialist Revolutionary Party seized power in late July of 1981. That distinguished them, people like Jabril George, who was the founder of the Gambian Socialist Revolutionary Party, and also the leader, Korkoy Sanyang, who actually was the figurehead for the coup in 1981. They considered themselves as staunch leftists, as Marxist-Leninists, revolutionary Pan-Africanists, etc. But they did not have, they had the support of perhaps one third or one half of the field force in 1981 in support of the coup. Later, 13 years later, when Yahya Jammeh took over, he was a lieutenant within the Gambian security forces, and he had more support among the officer corps as well as the rank and file for his seizure of power. And by that time, people were exhausted after 3 decades of rule on the part of President Dada Jawara. So people did want to see some type of new political leadership. And Jammeh was quite young when he took over office, and he had promised sweeping reforms inside the country. Some people would probably characterize him as a populist leader. However, he was popular in some quarters, and other quarters he was not very popular. But as you mentioned, he tried to pursue a non-aligned approach to governance, not openly declaring themselves socialists, but at the same time fostering what they considered to be a free market economy, which was pretty much the norm in many countries during this particular time period. First, as we talked about before, there was a whole movement beginning in the late 80s and early 90s, probably fostered by the collapse of the socialist countries in Eastern Europe and eventually the USSR towards multi-party democracy in these countries. Yet, even though this was the case, a lot of the countries fell into economic disarray, and there was an intensification of political conflict over who was going to control the state and the economy. So these are the problems that Yahya Jammeh faced during the 1990s and all the way up to the period in which he was overthrown, which was in early 2017. But as I said, he did maintain a populist approach to governance. However, the economy there still did not improve to the extent desired by first his ruling military council and then the political party that he formed 2 years after he took over.
Interesting. And when Colonel Jammeh was in power, he also banned the political parties. It's always interesting how always interesting how that happens and how the West, always looks the other way sometimes. And one of the parties he banned was the United Democratic Party, founded in 1996, and was led then, and I believe it's still led by Usano Darbo. Apologies if I'm butchering his name. And they are a consultative member of Socialist International. Were one of those, and they were one of those united leftist fronts that included the PPP and the NCP and the banned Gambian People's Party. I'm curious your assessment of them because Wikipedia describes them as being center left, social democrats, and being socially liberal. And I myself am generally supportive of parties that are both economically left and socially liberal and tolerant. However, as I've explained many times before, we know that Socialist International and Progressive Alliance, which is where the global left or center left parties meet to see how they can help one another out and to set out a left agenda or a left-leaning agenda globally. However, it's dominated by Western European and Nordic social democratic parties and parties like Labour Australia and Labour New Zealand, whom have all, since the late 70s and 80s and 90s, have pivoted hard to the economic right on their own working class and precarious middle class base, and have often been, supporters and class collaborationists with Western imperialism. So, yes. So, what's your assessment of the United Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think
United Gambia. Wait. Yes. The United Democratic Party, which is part of from Gambia. Apologies for that.
yeah, I think that those parties, which had been at odds against each other, um, formed an alliance in order to move out Jammeh from power. And I don't think it was based on political principles. They wanted to change within the system in the Gambia. Interestingly enough, when Yahya Jammeh was head of state in Gambia, he did form a political party, which you mentioned, and he did allow elections to take place inside the country. He also changed the name of the country from the Gambia Republic to the Islamic Republic of Gambia, which was quite interesting. Now, the name has been changed back since he was
Wow.
removed from office in 2017, but he was appealing to the Islamic world in that regard. But of course, Islam as a religion goes back way back to the period of the ancient Ghana Empire and later the Mali Empire and Songhai Empire, among others. And of course, you had elements traditionally within West Africa that supported the rise of Islam. Then there were others that fought against the Islamic kingdoms and states. For example, the Serb people attempted to maintain their traditional African beliefs and fought against the encroachment of Islam for many, many decades in West Africa. But there were others, of course, who did support this particular Islamic orientation. So it's quite interesting. Now, Jawara was, of course, later designated as a leader of the country. Now, he went into exile after the coup and then eventually returned to the country. They sent him on other details during his time out of office in terms of mediating conflicts and doing other things in West Africa. He became more or less a elder statesman. The coup that removed him in 1994 has been designated as a bloodless coup. So it wasn't like he was assassinated or other people were assassinated. It was just a plot to remove him. He was removed in somewhat of a palace coup, but yet no real harm was brought to him or his followers inside the country. It appears as if there was a mood in 1994 to bring about a new political dispensation, which Yahya Jammeh was attempting to foster during his time in office, the 13 years he spent in office in the Gambia.
But safe to say that Colonel Jammeh continued with more economic reactionary, right-wing economic policies on top of adding a lot of social conservatism to the element.
Yes, I would say so in terms of labeling the country the Islamic Republic of the Gambia suggests that he wanted to ally himself with the Islamic world and imposing, if not necessarily Sharia law, at least some stricter forms of social behavior inside of that West African state. But the population did continue to grow during this time period. Today, the population is over 2 million inside Gambia. But to emphasize, this is a very small country. It's heavily centered around the Gambian River, and it's totally encapsulated by Senegal, except for the opening in the at the Atlantic Ocean. So
Now,
it's a very small country. It's largely based on agricultural production and tourism. Now, the tourism was fostered heavily after the introduction of the TV series Roots, which is based on a book by Alex Haley. Alex Haley,
yes.
his family originally came from Southwest Tennessee, and he was a journalist. He wrote for several publications during the 1960s. He interviewed Malcolm X for Playboy magazine, I think in 1962. And then he had approached Malcolm X about writing an autobiography in collaboration with him on his life. This started in 1963. And that project, the autobiography of Malcolm X, really put Alex Haley's name on the map. And then about a decade later, the Roots Project took place, the book, and later the TV series, which up until that time, in 1976, I believe, when that came on, it was the largest, most watched television series in U.S. history. So it was quite a breakthrough. And the story, of course, goes back to an ancestor of Alex Haley's family, who was labeled Kuta Kente.
Yeah.
And this individual always maintained that the name that was given to him by the slave masters was not his real name, that his real name was an African name, and that he came from the Gambia. So as a result of the popularity of these TV series in the late 1970s, which later became an extended television series, a lot of African Americans in particular began to travel to Gambia looking for their ancestral roots. And that promoted the tourism industry in Gambia. And that combined with the agricultural production, brought in a lot of revenue to the Gambia.
Fascinating. And now, I of course, when did I see Roots? I must have seen it. Oh, jeez, I might have, I can't, okay, I can't remember which class I saw it, but it might have been my English class at some point. And yeah, I mean, it's not aged entirely well now, but it is a very interesting program. LeVar Burton played the
Yes.
slave Kunta Kinte, or Toby, as he's brutally called by the white slave masters. And LeVar Burton, for anybody who's a Trekkie, they'll know him,
Right.
from Star Trek: The Next Generation as Geordi with the famous, kind of space glasses and so forth like that. So very interesting. So,
yeah, it was very, very, very popular television series, and you had subsequent, tourism. There were commercial merchandise and products related to Roots. So yes, that attracted a lot of interest in the Gambia as a country during the late 1970s, early 1980s. So that's very interesting to mention that.
So that's fascinating. So now let's talk about Gambia currently. So since so since 2016, it's been under the leadership of Adama Barrow, who himself was a member at one time and won elections under the UDP. How do you assess his time in office so far, both when it comes to his socioeconomics domestically and his foreign policy? Adama Barrow was part of the big grand coalition called Coalition 2016, but now governs under the political party, the National People's Party. It's a bit vague, their ideology. Wikipedia says centrism and populism. So if I was a betting person, safe to say he's right-leaning to far right, because people who call themselves, or parties that even call themselves centrist, tend to be right-leaning. And populism, while it should be associated with the left and it should be a compliment, it's been wrongly used to describe the far right and these newer repugnance of far right parties and figures. So I'm curious your assessment of his governance so far.
Well, we have to look at how he actually came into office. In 2016, there were multi-party elections in Gambia, and the fact that Yahya Jammeh had won two previous elections, people assumed that he would win again. But when the results came out, it indicated that Barrow had actually won the elections. Now, Jammeh said initially that he would accept the results and that he would step aside and allow Adama Barrow to take office. Apparently, he had second thoughts. He was saying that evidence had been presented to him by people within the Electoral Commission, perhaps his own political party, suggesting there had been widespread voter fraud. So he was refusing to leave office. He suggested to have a rerun of the elections, which the Economic Community of West African States apparently disagreed with. And Adama Barrow, who the the Regional Economic Community of West African States, as well as the Western imperialist countries, said he actually won the elections and that he should be designated as the new president of the Gambia. He was actually sworn in the Gambian embassy in Senegal. So he was not even able to go back into the country until the Senegalese military commanded a force that was largely trained and coordinated by the United States Africa Command. This was under the leadership of President Macky Sall. Senegal had a special relationship or special status with the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, which was formed officially in 2008. So yes, so AFRICOM was very instrumental in coordinating the intervention by Senegal into Gambia to depose Yahya Jammeh and to impose Barrow as president. That's what happened in 2017. And of course, Yahya Jammeh went into exile, and Barrow has been the head of state since that time period, even though he has fallen out with some of his comrades who were part of his coalition party that brought him to office. But he still remains president of Gambia as we speak. But
Wow.
as you said, he's not governed by no means from the left. It's very center right in their approach to governance in the Gambia.
Wow. And currently, what has been Gambia's response then to what's been happening in West Africa, the Sahel, as well as the efforts of the U.S. and its allies to maintain a stranglehold on Africa through AFRICOM? But you've just told us that basically this this guy who supposedly was part of a popular opposition was actually groomed for the was actually kind of groomed for the job by the West, and actually is a product of AFRICOM. So I'm very curious. Yeah. So
Yeah,
very
I don't think he would have ever ascended to office if it had not been for the intervention of the Senegalese military, a country which is much larger than Gambia, which has a stronger military force. And Senegal, as I mentioned, had a special relationship status with AFRICOM. So they have been training their troops. They have been engaged in joint military operations with AFRICOM. So they were able, as a project, in regard to how they would intervene in this small West African state to overthrow the government and impose someone who was more pliant towards Western imperialism. And this is basically what happened in 2017 in the Gambia. Jammeh had done some things that had inflamed sentiments against him in the West, particularly after he designated the country as an Islamic Republic. Nonetheless, he wasn't an ultra left leader or even a socialist leader for that matter. He just fell afoul of Britain and the United States, and they moved to oust him. They saw an opportunity with the disagreements over the elections. And then, of course, they coordinated the Senegalese army to go in and take over the government and impose Barrow as the president of the country. But no, they have not reached out to the Alliance of Sahel States. They have not indicated at all that they want to join the AES. So that's pretty much the status of the Gambia at this point. It's still very much allied with Western imperialism.
That's a perfect then segue to this question, which is any more you can tell us about Gambia and BRICS, and any historical relations with some in BRICS that are continuing, and will continue to be good, depending on if Western imperialism sabotages it. And from what you've been talking to us about, Gambia is one of those great examples of even when you're a right winger, even when you're a fake leftist, even when you're a flaming right winger, or and you're a good friend to and you're a good friend to Western imperialism, that still doesn't mean that the Western imperialists will leave you alone. They'll still overthrow you, even if you've been a right winger and a good friend to them. So I'm very curious your
Exactly.
response when we
And
talk
it's
about
happened.
Gambian bricks.
There are numerous examples of this. Manuel Noriega in Panama, and there were others
Mobutu
who
of Congo, Mobutu of Congo.
yeah, Mobutu, his time was up. And they felt, he should be moved out. Same thing with Yahya Jammeh. He was moved out by the Western imperialist countries, utilizing the Senegalese military under Macky Sall. And that is what happened there. And they will do the same thing to Barrow if they feel as if he's acting against their interests, or he's doing things that are hampering the facilitation of Western imperialist interests in the Gambia or anywhere else in West Africa. We saw what happened when Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown in Niger in 2023, and they attempted to form a ECOWAS military force to have him reimposed, but that fell apart very rapidly because people have learned some lessons over the last several years in terms of the role of France, Britain, and the United States in these West African states. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in Gambia over the next few years. He was reelected again in 2021. So we'll see what happens in the upcoming elections.
And final question. Currently, does Gambia, despite betrayals, setbacks, mistakes, and more, when governments calling themselves of the left when in power, not pursuing policies that could have immensely helped the majority working class, working poor, and chronically unemployed people, does Gambia currently, in spite of all that, does Gambia currently have a strong left-wing movement? And any final thoughts you want to share about Gambia and how if the nation really wants to overcome the scourge that is extreme poverty and all the terrible ills that come with it, people living in destitution, squalor, that the only way to eradicate it really is it's only African socialism, Pan-Africanist socialism, Marxism, or barbarism and the endless misery that is austerity politics.
Yes, I'm not aware of any strong left-wing organizations or political parties in Gambia today, but in the past, of course, socialist, Pan-Africanist, and Marxist-Leninist ideas were popular among a segment, particularly of the youth, during the 1970s and 1980s. In fact, it was that factor which created the conditions for the rise of the Gambian Socialist Revolutionary Party, which was banned in 1980 and was forced underground, became the Gambian Underground Revolutionary Socialist Workers Party during that particular time period. But yes, the leaders such as Jabril and the other leader, Sanyang, who was a spokesperson for the coup. And what was interesting about the coup in 1981 was that it was led by civilians with the assistance of the field force. So it was not a military coup, even though it utilized military means. The one in 1994, of course, was a military coup led by a lieutenant, Yahya Jammeh, but that was the reason why they were able to consolidate power. In 81, they did not anticipate a Senegalese military intervention to put down the coup. In 1994, that did not happen either because there was a popular support, significant popular support for the seizure of power by Yahya Jammeh. Nonetheless, in 2017, the tide had turned again, and there was efforts on the part of the Western imperialist countries to mobilize a military force to come in and replace Yahya Jammeh and to install Adama Barrow. So I'm sure there are a lot of disgruntled elements right now in the Gambia. And with the change of government in Senegal last year, with President Faye, um, even though he did not move to the left as people had hoped or anticipated, there is a distinction between his policies and those of Macky Sall. Nonetheless, he did go to France, one of the earlier foreign trips that he took. So this kind of disillusioned some people inside of Senegal. So today, if there was a similar crisis in Gambia, for example, with the elections coming up, if there's a dispute over who actually won the elections and Barrow, for example, refuses to leave office, I'm not sure that Faye at this stage would be willing to lead or to coordinate an intervention force to overthrow the government in Gambia. But they've intervened twice before. In 1981 to reinstall President Jawara, and then, of course, in 2017 to overthrow Yahya Jammeh. So that option is open, it's available. Whether or not it'll take place depends on the internal politics inside of the Gambia.
As well as anti-imperialist movements and solidarity movements. So that's quite interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it would be interesting if there was a left-wing movement that came to power in Gambia, what the position of the Senegalese government would be in terms of the Patriots, the Senegalese Patriots Party, which is headed by Faye and Sonko. So we'll see what happens. But there's a lot of political ferment that's taking place now in West Africa. We saw the Alliance of Sahel States formed less than 2 years ago, and the French troops were asked to leave. Senegal has also said they want the French troops to leave, but it's not clear what they're going to do about the involvement with AFRICOM, United States Africa Command, which under Macky Sall had very close relations with the Senegalese government.
Interesting. Well, we'll be monitoring. Well, we're definitely going to be monitoring that, and it's definitely one of many countries that we're going to be having to explore again when when these elections and upheavals happen. But until then, well,
Yeah.
until then, we were joined on this All Things Africa edition, learning about the history and current affairs of Gambia with our always wonderful returning champion, friend of the show, historian, journalist, and Pan-Africanist leftist and all-round anti-imperialist and support of all people power movements, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Reports. Check out his work and all of his appearances on 1+1. Subscribe to Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Report. Donate to them. Don't forget to do the same for 1+1 and donate to us, please. And again, share widely all of 1+1's content and encourage others to like us and again share and donate. The next country we'll be exploring is we're going to be taking a break from mainland Africa. And we're going to be going a little bit to, and we're going to go to we're going to be going to an island nation called Cape Verde. So
Yes.
join us.
Very interesting history as well.
Yes, it is a very, very interesting history, and I've already even did some major already prepared all my questions for that. Great. So we're going to be exploring Cape Verde. Join us next week for that, and have a great weekend, folks. Good night and good luck. And I said to myself that I wasn't going to do this, but I'll just say, and I'm not going to drop an F-bomb or anything, but that's my response to the Nobel Peace Prize and awarding Marina Machado solidarity to the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan people, solidarity forever to the people of to all the people of historic Palestine and so forth. And so we will try to we will try to return to the topic of historic Palestine in the future if it's possible. But until then, folks, have a great weekend, and all my best until then.